I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am privileged to be recording this vodcast today, the Gimuy Woolabara Yidinji people of the Gimuy, and I would like to recognise their elders past, present and emerging.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a very special series of The Growth Distillery. We are filming live from tropical North Queensland at the always exceptional Cairns Festival, and I'm here with Dave Hovenden, co-founder of the Misfits and one of the architects behind this brilliant festival of ideas. Welcome, Dave. Good to have you on the vodcast.
Thanks, Dan. Great to be here.
Thank you, mate. And we're here in the theme of Cairns. We're here talking about storytelling. It has been on the minds of marketers and advertisers across the week. So to kick things off, I'd love to get your take on how things have changed in the world of storytelling over the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, exploded, I guess, is the word. It's just so fast, the change has been. Obviously, there's so many layers to it. There's the overlay of technology. We've got machines that can tell stories to us now, and ChatGPT, for instance, can, it adds an air of authority to what can be complete claptrap, right? On one end of it. But then the ability for people to tell stories to such an amazingly huge audience that, wasn't there. And everyone has a platform now. And obviously there's good and bad sides to that as well. But, there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube, as they say. So it's the world we live in.
So beyond technology, what do you see as the forces really shaping storytelling, particularly within the space that we're curating over the week in advertising and media?
We've seen so many really interesting stories come out about how brands are, doing amazing things about it. It's how brands stand out, I think, is if they don't have a story, they're just a generic product, and I think that's, it's the only thing that can command any sort of price differential or market share or anything of that nature. So, I just think it has to be part of the any brand's identity to have a story that why it exists, the why of it, if you like.
And do you see from your perspective that storytelling is becoming a more potent tool in the marketer's toolkit, particularly as you said, everybody has a platform now, and as brands come to break through the noise, the nucleus of that why has to sit in storytelling, surely.
Absolutely, yeah. I was just actually in a session just now, and I don't know if you've seen it, but We Shook the World. It's one of Apple's most recent campaigns. No. If you get a chance, if anyone gets a chance, check it out. And it's just this amazing. It tells the story of, I think it's 4 or 5 different people with disabilities. Various. One guy's in a wheelchair. Someone, one of the ladies, looks like she might have been a thalidomide, but has no arms, sort of thing. But they obviously hide that part of the story initially, and it's just showing people using Siri and think, oh God, aren't they lazy? They're just asking Siri to look at the weather and all that sort. And then there's a big reveal, right, about how the technology is enabling them to live full and rich lives. And and it's such subtle brand placement in that story about the why if they do it, So apart from Apple doesn't make a shit ton of money, right? But from a branding perspective, it's incredibly powerful.
They have always been consummate marketers.
Absolutely. We always look out for the new Apple ad.
So look, obviously putting on a festival like this, there is a huge amount of storytelling that has to go into putting on an event. So I'd love to get, an understanding, how do you and your team interweave storytelling into an event like this to make it, the magic that it really is?
Yeah, look, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we'll go back next week. We'll probably lie around and do nothing next week.
I think you've earned a reprieve.
But seriously, straight away, we'll start looking at, and we know we've booked dates in May for next year for this event, and we have to think about, what are the stories that are percolating through society? What are people worried about? And and you got to look at it at a macro. Obviously, the cost of living is a huge issue in people's lives at the moment, and that sort of thing. Global instability, and that. But then think, right, from a marketer's point of view, what does that mean, right? And how's it all come about? And then we've got to project it 12 months forward and say, well, what's going to be dead and buried by then, right? And what's going to be rising? And of course, you're guessing, right? But so, for instance, this year we really knew, with the voice to Parliament being an issue, and it's funny that we're in reconciliation week, at the minute, which is good timing. reconciliation was going to be a huge part of this conference and that whole of Australia perspective. So so we leaned into that a lot this year. So you would have seen last night we had King Stingray perform. Amazing Indigenous bands.
And so do you similarly to the speakers, do you put a storytelling overlay into the ceremonies and the artifacts? I picked up my fabulous swag bag, on entry.
Absolutely, yeah. We try. I mean, obviously, you can't incorporate every single speech and performance into one narrative, but we can have lots of intertwining narratives, if you like. But there has to be a cohesion, because if something's not part of it, and we do spend a lot of time, arguing with sponsors, frankly.
Healthy discourse.
Healthy discourse, thank you, Dan. That's a much better way to say it. About, no, you can't do that because it just doesn't fit into what we do. For instance, a lot of people, they want to use single-use plastics and stuff like that. It's like, absolutely not, right? This area is known for its pristine natural beauty, right? Is one of the other things. So Cairns is a gorgeous, the Great Barrier Reef, one of the World Heritage listed nations. You can't be having sunscreen that's damaging to coral, for instance, stuff like that. So there's all those little things that fit into that narrative.
I've certainly noticed, even from the edible cups, what an amazing little artifact.
Have you eaten the cup, Dan? That's the question.
Look, I have. I'm gonna withhold judgment on the taste, but I think these are the sacrifices that I think we've got to make.
That's right.
To build a better future for our children. Right?
Sure.
Okay, give me an example of gold standard storytelling.
So we talked about Apple, and that's the pointy end of the market with unimaginable budgets and all the rest of it. There was one that actually I saw just a little while ago as well, and it's for a brand of eggs, and I don't actually know the brand, but it's called Fit Chicks. And what the story is they put fitness trackers on chickens, right? And the chickens run around the yard, and they can see how many steps the chickens do each day. And so they can prove that they're not in like a little cage, or they're in a restricted thing, and they can put on their eggs that they're fit chicks that laid the eggs, and they're smashing out like 30,000 steps a day, right? So it's just a really funny little example, and it's a great use of technology, and it would be relatively cheap to do, right, from a brand. But it just shows that's like, our chickens are genuinely free range and loving that. So that's one example. Another one, the Howardson and Company did for Matilda Bay, a small brewing company. They did one that's done quite well for itself, won quite a few awards in the last years. It's called Rejected Ales. And the story, they say, is this is the story of rejection, delicious rejection. But what it was is they said their master brewer went through 19 different batches of their golden ale before they got to the one they said, this is it. And so how they told the story of the perfection of that, they put in certain liquor stores a fridge with labeled just 1 through to 19, the various rejected ales. Like
and then finally the one that they landed on.
And then, so if you bought a 6-pack of their beer, you could pick one of the rejected ales to try it. And each one had a story about why the master brewer had rejected it.
What an awesome activation.
And then they entered the rejected ales into some of the global beer tasting competitions, if you like, and they won 3 of them won silver medal and stuff like that. And they said, which is rather fitting because the one they decided had won gold the year before. So that's just such a fantastic story about essentially being so pedantic about your product
and the artifacts of that journey as well.
And,
from the activation.
And to say, when I saw it, I said that it's the story of rejection, right? I thought, how is this going to work out? But it's really engaging.
They're 2 great examples.
Yeah.
All right. To wrap this very, very brief conversation that you and I get to have, what would be your advice to brands and businesses that are looking to reconnect with authentic storytelling over the coming years?
That's a good one, isn't it? Look, make sure that it is your story. You're not putting on someone else's, story, or like, oh God, it's the environment. Let's do something, because you see it all the time, the outrage around greenwashing or purpose washing or
wellness
anything
washing.
Like any of those things. Like it's got to actually fit your brand, right? And that means probably doing a little bit of hard work to define what is something that genuinely is part of your brand, and if it's not. And I know you've spoken to Jane, and I'm sure she's on an episode. As she says, if your product's boring, sell your people, right? So it might be the people that work in your brand, you know what I mean, and the work they do. So,
Yeah, good advice.
Yeah.
Dave, thank you so much for joining us on the vodcast.
Dan.
Have a wonderful festival. You've done an exceptional job. I've certainly enjoyed myself, and I wish
mate.
you all the success this week.
Fantastic. Thanks for the great feedback and
Pleasure.
pleasure to be here.